24 years ago, I wound up with a group of guys who had an idea for a recreational fishing show, and others had tried, but there'd been no evidence to suggest that recreational fishing had a significant value in the community, other than anecdotal evidence, because clearly you start talking to people and every second person's a fisherman. But then a survey was done, and as a consequence of that survey, here I am, because we took the results of the survey to the networks, and since that day, 23 years, series 23 now, 552 shows later, here I am talking about compromise, and I think we bloody need it. You know, I think we need to, in terms of the groups that have a stake in the fishery, I think we need to learn to leave the bloody guns and knives at the door and get behind a desk and start talking to each other. We've got a lot to share and a lot of value. But I thought I'd just show you a little bit of this survey. Oh, you bloody bugger. This, believe it or not, is my first PowerPoint presentation. My daughter she's 11, she's absolutely bloody disgusted that it's taken me this long to get up with the play. But this NRB research survey that came out in October 1991 said that 914,000 Kiwis over the age of 16, now get that, over the age of 16, go fishing at least once a year. Now that's staggering. And bear in mind the age of this survey. The other thing was too that they spent theoretically $745 million in association with the sport. So a large chunk of population and quite clearly a big earn. Now also, we know that based on that, approximately a third of New Zealanders claim to be recreational anglers. Now that's great. So you want to catch fish, you want to eat fish, you go and catch it, fine. But that leaves 2/3 of the population who, if they want to feed, have to go to the supermarket, have to buy fish, which in essence justifies and verifies the value of the local commercial industry. So if you talk about a shared fishery, there's a classic example of how we need to work together and get on. Sure, we stake our claim as recreational anglers, and we want to ensure that we're responsible in that claim. So that means sharing information and staking a claim to areas and to fish stocks that we can pass on to future generations. Now that means being responsible, and being responsible brings with it its own little challenges. Now, the Minister spoke about Snapper 1. Now the heart of Snapper 1 clearly is the Hauraki Gulf. Now it's estimated that the population of Auckland will double in the next 20 to 30 years. Now we're arguing for a stake in the fishery. 30% of anglers nationwide focus on that Hauraki Gulf area, 30%. Now, the impact on the fishery over the next 20 years is going to be dramatic. If we say that ratio of 1/3 of people go and catch their own fish, 2/3 of people acquire their fish from other sources, and we extrapolate those figures, that's a frightening thought, and a clear indication that we need to take significant responsibility, and we need to work together. The current estimate is that the inner Hauraki Gulf, as I said, 30% of all angling effort nationwide. That is absolutely phenomenal. Now, when you double the population, what's going to happen to the ratio? Because the rest of the country in the next 20 to 30 years is not going to have a population doubling. So the impact is significant. Now, at the moment, it's estimated that 4 to 5% of recreational anglers belong to one of the representative bodies. Now, the representative bodies are very vocal. A lot of the information that's conveyed is contentious, but a lot of it is perfectly fair. We want a stake in the fishery. We want that stake to be recognised, and we want to carry that forward to the future so that our kids have a future fishery. Now, the way forward is to actually recognise the need for collaboration and compromise. So hence that idea of leaving the guns and knives at the door and getting in a room and talking about opportunity. And one of the good things about this is that the 95% seem to have adopted a reasonably balanced view, I think. Because what we have since 1991 is we have innovation, and we have in particular the greater use of social media. I'll tell you how that can work in your favour. My wife and I, on our wedding anniversary, went to the movie theatre to watch a movie, the one about the fellow in the wheelchair, Hawkins, and his demise and his success story. So anyway, we go to the movie theatre, and as we're going in, someone had said, look, the wheelchair, you're going to have to get out of your wheelchair and sit in a seat. Okay, you're going to have to sit in a seat. Well, how do I do that? Well, we'll pick you up, sir, and we'll put you in the seat. This was gold class. If ever you've been to a gold class movie theatre, there's 40 seats. I think 18 of them were occupied on that night. You had a central row and then two massive aisles, twice the width of the wheelchair. But I couldn't sit in an aisle. I had to be picked up and put in a bloody chair because I represented a health and safety hazard. Health and safety hazard, you might say. Okay, so the bloody place catches fire and I'm sitting in the chair and some bastard's got to come back into the dangerous environment and pick me up and put me back in my chair so I can get out. So anyway, we said, look, and there was a young Kiwi guy that was serving drinks and snack foods, and he said, look, don't worry about it, mate, it'll be fine, just go in. So we went in, locked the brakes up alongside the chair, and the movie starts, fantastic movie. Sitting there, and the next thing, tap, tap, tap on the shoulder. Sir, you're either going to have to get in that chair or you're going to have to leave. Now, there is a point to this, I'll get to this, and it has relevance. So I said, no, I'm not leaving. And my wife, Sandy, she was a lot more vocal and used language that I probably wouldn't have used. And the guy buggered off. Well, 5 minutes later, he came back with security. So this is how bloody ridiculous it got. He came back with security. So they said, sir, you either get in the bloody chair or you leave. So at that point, the language got quite colourful on both sides, and we interrupted the movie as we left. Now that is absolutely friggin' ludicrous. So I did two things. I got in touch with the Minister of Disability Services and I posted on Facebook. Facebook, we didn't have bloody Facebook 25 years ago. Now the impact of Facebook is absolutely dramatic. And we recently had a camera away on an Orange Roughy research vessel, one of the Tally's vessels, Amatil Explorer. 18 days of filming, and I'm wading through at the moment a terabyte of footage. Thanks, Andrew. That takes a bloody long time to wade through a terabyte of footage, but it's fantastic. Now, I posted that we had a cameraman away on an Orange Roughy research vessel, and some twit immediately responded saying, how can you do that? You know, that fishery's hammered, it's blah, blah, on it goes. And immediately, one of the commercial guys responded with a beautifully balanced view, and the guy said basically thanks. Now what we have is we have an immediate ability to communicate now, which we never had before. We have responsibility, and as recreational anglers we're having a massive impact on the resource, but we have a massive misunderstanding going on, and we need to get smarter about that. We need to communicate accurate information, and we can do it immediately through social media and get a response. Now, I've said to you guys before, you need to put your hand up and celebrate some of the things that you're doing. We need to make more of precision seafood harvesting, Dave. We need to recognise more the fact that monitoring of the fleets in Snapper 1 is being done. We need to let people know why. We need to let people know that you're taking responsibility. But the flip side of that, of course, is that we need, as recreational anglers, to take some responsibility. You know, if we represent a third of the population, and if in the Hauraki Gulf, for example, that population in that particular area is going to double in 20 to 30 years, the impact will be phenomenal. And unless we take a stake now and take responsibility, we will be legislated against, I expect. Now, remember what happened when poor old Nathan Guy came out and said that the science suggested that the snapper limit should be 3 in the Hauraki Gulf. I tell you what he learnt immediately is he learnt about a thing called political sustainability, because the backlash was absolutely phenomenal. And it's a very real thing. What we have is we have a balance now, a requirement of balance that balances the science and what is politically sustainable with what we all desire. So, it's, the way forward is a minefield, but I think we're actually doing okay. In some areas we're doing better than others. Collaboration among the stakeholders. One of the great things that I have, one of the luxuries, is that I have the ability to move around the country and speak to different groups. In smaller communities, people know each other. They know each other and they're able to get on. Like, for example, I was down in Bluff recently, and I was talking to Graham Wright from Barnes Oysters. And he said, well, we don't have a problem with oysters here, with recreational catch and with commercial catch, because we all sit around a table and we talk about what we're doing, and we know that it's got to be sustainable. Fantastic. Now, the greatest examples, or the best examples I know of communities working together are in Kaikoura, for example, Te Korowai. Now, a friend of mine was involved in that group initially, and I said, Dennis, how the hell did you get people like Forrest and Bird talking to recreational anglers and commercial fishermen? He said, we spent years butting heads. He said it took us 6 years before someone came up with this idea that we had to compromise. And so what we coined as a phrase, it was called gifts and gains. If we're to work together as a collective group, what we have to do is we have to gift a bit to gain a bit. Gifts and gains. So that was why Te Korowai ultimately moved from a situation of conflict to one that has become a success story today. Now, within this Te Korowai framework, another guy that I've filmed with, Ian Croucher, South Bay charter fisherman, he's putting together at the moment a code of practice for the charter fleet, because what they're recognising, even in a small area where the impact of fishermen is perhaps not that great, what they're saying is that the impact of the charter fleet beyond standard recreational anglers is of major significance. So how the charter fleet operate and what sort of code of practice they adopt is going to be really important. And one of the things that they're talking about doing, and Ian's actively doing it, is they're saying, okay, our crayfish allowance is 6 per person per day. But what we will do is we will only allow anyone that gets off our vessels to take 1 cray per day. Because if we're really to invest in the future of the resource, we need to take that sort of responsibility. Absolutely fantastic. Now, the second example is Fiordland Guardians. That's been in existence for longer. I was fortunate enough to speak to their launch conference in Te Anau. Absolutely fantastic. And I was walking in those days. When I walked in, there was a mate of mine in the audience, and this is the sort of welcome you get out there in the little towns. He goes, shit, Sinclair, the things you see when you haven't got a gun. And that was my welcome in Te Anau. It's like, bloody great, Hannibal, nice to see you, mate. But he said to me afterwards, he said, it's easy for us to work together because we're a small community, a small group, and we know what we want to achieve. And Fiordland Guardians is a classic example. So you may want to Google Te Korowai or Fiordland Guardians and just have a look at how that all works. So what I did here is I looked at the shared fishery, and I believe that that's our way forward. We do share the fishery. I don't care how you package it, that's what we do. And that's what we're going to have to do better. And in brackets, I've done something really contentious because I've put charter in those brackets. And the reason I'm doing that is you imagine in a place like the Hauraki Gulf, or even the whole of Snapper One, what sort of impact the charter fleet has on the resource. And, recreational, we don't want our take measured. Commercial don't want their take measured either. And some of the guys have been saying to me, shit, we fudged the paperwork. Well, what? They're just trying to get this to justify reducing the limits. I mean, we can't have that. Well, unless we have transparency and honesty, we won't have a bloody fishery. One of the MPI guys spoke to me a while ago about Snapper One, and he was saying, I shake my head a little bit. He said, we compromised. We went from 9 to 7 snapper for the rec limit, and surely 7's adequate for anyone. And I believe that it absolutely is. There's a lot of fish. 7's a lot. In fact, I've never taken 7 that I can remember. It's way too many. But yeah, it's not so much the limit, it's to limit your take, I think, sometimes too. There is that great phrase, you don't have to catch your limit, you can limit your take. And I think that we need perhaps a little bit more of that, a little bit more recognition. I've spoken about commercial and the fact that you do good work, and I think you need to communicate that more effectively. And I think you need a pat on the back to a certain extent too, and acknowledge the good work that you do in certain areas. I think iwi, clearly, we have a traditional responsibility with iwi, but I think iwi has a responsibility in itself. There are traditional occasions that are recognised and they require a large amount of seafood. And I think the question needs to be asked within some communities, is that actually sustainable? And I think that iwi, by virtue of its natural responsibility, will start asking those questions. So a way forward, so what do we do to actually make progress with all of this? We've seen the Te Korawais, we've seen that the Fiordland Guardians can work in certain communities. And in both those communities, it's not just about the fishery. What we're dealing with is everyone who has an impact on the resource gets together. I flippantly mentioned forest and bird before. Critical, that they have inclusion in management because they have a vested interest. But when it comes to the fishery, it's us. It's recreational, commercial, and iwi. So in terms of a way forward, I think there's a very simple way to look at it. And this statement, shared sustainable fisheries for the future, I think encapsulates where we should all go. We share the fishery, we acknowledge that. It needs to be sustainable or we won't have a bloody future. I have this great image of my son on camera when he was 3 catching his first snapper. He's now 19 and the silly bugger's a marine engineering apprentice. I don't know where he gets it. All he wants to do is hunt, dive and fish. Don't know where he gets it from. But it is so wonderful to have those memories with our kids. For 20 years now, we have been running kids programs. I'm patron of Police Blue Light, which is the youth education arm of the police. So our focus is on fisheries. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to educate. And I think that while we beat our heads against a brick wall sometimes trying to change behaviour that's entrenched, we also need to embark on an educational program and start with younger people too, and allow them to grow up understanding that we share a fishery, understanding that we have a responsibility, and understanding that the whole bloody thing is about what was said in Kaikoura, gifts and gains. If you want to gain a bit, you've got to give a bit. And that means compromise, and it also means collaboration. So that's my plea and my request. I applaud you for what you do. I'm a very staunch recreational angler. I do believe we have to take more responsibility, and if we bloody well don't, the government will legislate against it. Okay, Nathan Guy went, oh my God, look out. But if we don't make decisions and they're not smart, other people will make them for us. That's what we need to do. So thank you very much. Simple message from me, and hopefully we become part of the solution and not part of the problem. Thank you.